The free ELO machine from 13.17 being Jarvan will be targeted with a much needed nerf this patch. Riot will also be toning down Tryndamere as he landed extremely OP after his recent buffs. ADC meta may finally be in for a shakeup as item changes to Stormrazor and Static Shiv are on the way. We've got all this and so much more to cover as we provide you guys with a complete update on the solo queue tier list thanks to the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. Let's kick things off by covering the ADC item alterations for this patch. First up is Stormrazor. AD on the item is being increased from 50 up to 55. Prior to this buff, Stormrazor was 97.5% gold efficient, but it will now jump to 103% efficient moving forward. One ADC to pay attention to for this patch who will be on the rise is Jhin. Jhin was one of the few ADCs who had been running Stormrazor as a core pickup in previous patches, so he's going to see a nice indirect boost. It's tough to say whether other ADCs will begin picking the item up again, as 5 AD is not a massive buff by any means. A pretty huge change to Static Shiv is on the way, as the minion energized damage is being reduced from 250 scaling to 350 to 200 at all ranks. To compensate for the loss of minion damage though, AD is going up from 45 to 50. The champion who will be hit the hardest by this alteration is LeBlanc. At least if you're playing a traditional ADC, the added 5 AD is a decent compensation buff, but that extra AD comes nowhere close to making up for the loss of wave clear on an AP champ like LeBlanc. Zeri, Sivir, Kai'Sa, and Vayne are 4 traditional ADCs who have been running Shiv the most in recent patches, so they will become slightly weaker, but not to the extent where their solo queue power is greatly impacted. Who would have thought that buffing Spear of Shojin and Gore Drinker in the same patch would end up problematic? Apparently not Riot, so here we are in 13.18 with some follow-up nerfs to Spear of Shojin. AD on the item is dropping from 60 down to 55. Not the end of the world by any means, and in all honesty, the item will definitely remain a core purchase on everyone that had been abusing it in 13.17. Crown of the Shattered Queen is one of the most forgotten items in the game, so Riot will be trying to address that in 13.18. Ability power will see a considerable boost going from 70 to 85. You will no longer gain the Poise passive where you would receive 10 scaling to 40 bonus AP when the Safeguard passive would proc. The Safeguard damage reduction passive is being changed from reducing 75% damage for 1.5 seconds to reducing 40% damage for 2.5 seconds. So overall, less power loaded into the passive of the item and more general power being added. The big question revolves around whether adding 2.5 seconds to the Safeguard passive will be more worth it and make up for the lesser reduction of damage. Against super bursty champions that deal all their damage in an instant, this is definitely a nerf to the Safeguard passive. On the flip side, against champs with more extended fight power, it's likely either neutral or slightly positive. All in all, we don't see any specific champion becoming super OP off the back of these changes, but we'll be sure to keep you guys informed if any new champs begin popping up with Crown. With Worlds on the horizon, the champions being buffed for this patch are all quite flashy ones, and first up is Aurelia. Our cooldown is being altered, going from 140 scaling to 100 seconds to 125 scaling to 85 seconds. So 15 seconds off at all ranks, which will help to amplify the snowball power of Aurelia. Even with this buff, we don't see it being enough to significantly push Aurelia up the tier list, as she does run into difficulties against many of the meta top laners. Renekton is being picked a ton right now, and Aurelia is only winning 45% of the time against him. Aurelia also fares quite poorly into OP tier champs like Malphite and Garen, so this buff to her R is not going to help out in those losing matchups. It's just going to make her snowball even harder in the matchups that she already can win. As a result, we'll be leaving Aurelia in the top lane A tier for 13.18. Next up on the buff list for top lane is going to be Kennen. E energy cost is being lowered from 100 scaling to 80 at all ranks. R cooldown is buffed as well, going from 120 seconds at all ranks to 120 scaling to 80 seconds. This R buff is a really interesting one that should be more positively skewed towards helping Kennen in the lower elos. We have to keep in mind that even though R duration is down by a whopping 40 seconds, it's only at level 16 where this comes into effect, and most games do not even last that long. For high elo and pro play, we really don't see these changes affecting the viability of Kennen, but for the lower ranks where games just factually last longer, he will become a bit stronger. For Kennen's tier list placement, he's going to remain in the B tier for now, as this buff is not going to do anything in regards to addressing his terrible meta matchups. The attack range buff to Tryndamere in 13.17 landed on the OP side of things, so Riot won't be wasting any time in toning him down. Base AD will be dropping from 68 to 66. Health per level sees a dip as well, going from 115 to 108. Whenever we see these 2 or 3 AD nerfs, it usually equates to around around a 1% drop in champion win rate, so when you also factor in the health per level nerf, somewhere around a 1.5 to 2% dip is likely for 13.18. This will definitely be enough to remove Tryndamere from his OP tier status, but not enough that he'll be falling completely out of meta, as we'll be shifting him from OP down into S. So taking a look at the complete top lane tier list, the OP tier will be locked down by Malphite, Garen, and Illaoi. Malphite is just such a reliable top lane pick right now because his meta matchups are great, and even if you do run into a more difficult lane, the utility and teamfight power that Malphite provides allows him to be useful no matter the outcome of the laning phase. Garen has had so many changes go his way in previous patches, whether it be the Hull Breaker buffs from 13.10 or the recent Stride Breaker buff in 13.17, and he's jumped up heavily in priority as a result. Illaoi is just a solo queue monster, as her ability to 1v2 and take over games with a lead is absolutely insane. She's jumped up in priority much like Garen due to many positive item alterations in recent patches like Hull Breaker and Sterix. One minor adjustment we're making to the top lane tier list for this patch is moving Jax from S into A tier. Jax has been on the edge between S and A in previous patches, so with the nerf to Spear of Shojin in 13.18, we've decided to push him down. A few of the highest value top lane bans of the patch are Malphite, Tryndamere, and Illaoi. Malphite, Mundo, and Garen are three of the highest priority top laners to climb low elo the fastest. Moving on to the jungle changes, first up we have a minor buff to Gwen. Gwen's passive monster cap damage is being increased from 6 plus 10% AP to 10 plus 15% AP. Health growth is going up as well from 109 to 115. Considering Gwen has been a relatively niche and underplayed jungler in recent patches, it's difficult to say whether or not this buff actually has any significance. For now, we'll be leaving Gwen in the jungle B tier as we just can't see the buff being enough to warrant a push up the tier list due to her relative strength heading into the patch. The much anticipated Jarvan nerf will consist of the champion losing some damage on his passive. Percent health damage from Jarvan passive is going from 8 to 6%. On paper, this might not seem like a big deal, but if we compare the damage output at level 3 and the background gameplay, you can see it's about a 20 damage decrease. You have to keep in mind that this nerf not only affects Jarvan's ability to duel, but it hurts his clear speed as well. We also have to factor in the nerf to Spear of Shojin when considering Jarvan's power level. Jarvan could very well still be on the edge of an OP tier position just due to how massively ahead he was of every other jungler in 13.17. All things considered though, we do expect these nerfs to shave a few percentage points off of Jarvan's solo queue win rate, and we will be bumping him out of OP and into S for 13.18. One of the more odd nerfs for 13.18 are headed the way of Red Kayn. The reason the nerfs are a bit odd are because Blue Kayn is actually still more popular than Red Kayn in solo queue. Red Kayn is outperforming slightly, but not to the huge margin to where you'd think he's in need of a nerf. Nevertheless, Riot has other plans as they will be reducing Red Kayn's passive healing, going from 20 scaling to 30% to 25% at all levels. Red Kayn's RAD ratio is dropping as well from 13% to 10%, cutting down on the scaling power of Red Kayn here, and when Riot make these kinds of changes, it's usually because the champion is performing much greater in low elo than they are in high elo. That is definitely the case with Kayn right now, as he's hovering around 51% in low elo and 49% in high elo. This nerf won't completely remove Kayn from meta, but he's not going to be S tier worthy anymore as we're bumping him down into A. So if we have a look at the complete jungle tier list, OP tier will be on the move for yet another patch. Nocturne and Rek'Sai will be slotting into the OP tier with Jarvan dropping down. Nock has been such a great jungler in recent patches, and the buffs of Stride Breaker from 13.17 have pushed him over the top. Same thing in regards to Rek'Sai. The champion has been S tier or above for the majority of Season 13, but it was really the recent Stride Breaker buff that has solidified her as a premier jungle carry. Due to their high presence in meta and overall power levels, we have Jarvan, Hecarim, and Kha'Zix rated as 3 of the best jungle bans. Nocturne is definitely the play right now if you're looking to climb out of low elo, but Rammus and Shyvana are powerful options as well. So after a pretty big patch for mid lane in 13.17, there's very little action for 13.18. On top of the meta for a second patch in a row will be Vex, as she has been outperforming everyone else as a result of her 13.17 buffs. With that buff to W, Vex is just way too good into high mobile melee mids, who we see played so much in solo queue. Buffs to Aurelia not only help her out in the top lane, but in the mid lane as well, and we actually expect them to be more impactful for mid than top lane Aurelia. Mid Aurelia has more favorable matchups right now than top lane Aurelia, at least in solo queue, and the buff to R will help her snowball against the majority of those squishy mid lane champs. As a result, we have given Aurelia a minor adjustment up the tier list, going from B into A tier. Tryndamere is another champ primarily played in the top lane, but who's also seeing ridiculous success as a mid laner right now, so he will become a tad bit weaker this patch. Trynd mid had been overperforming so much though in 13.17 that we don't see the nerf being enough to remove him from an S tier slot. Orianna has actually exceeded our expectations after her 13.17 buffs, so we're giving her that push into S for 13.18. Ori is back in a really great spot if you're looking for that reliable blind pick mage that can do well in the majority of mid lane matchups. Diving into some analytics, Orianna actually holds a positive win rate into all 10 of her most common solo queue matchups right now. A few of the most ban-worthy mid lane champions for the current meta include Zed, Naafiri, and Vex. Malzahar, Aurelion Sol and Annie are the highest priority mid lane champs for low elo. The only ADC buff this patch is not even a champion we see primarily played in this role, being Senna. Riot's looking to buff up ADC Senna by increasing her crit strike damage from 91.5 to 100%. WAOE hits will now also count towards passive procs. Since Senna has been completely absent from the ADC solo queue meta in recent patches, it's difficult to predict how much this buff will influence her. If anything, this buff may have more of an influence on pro play Senna than solo queue, as we could see her pulled out in pro with very specific duos like Tahm Kench. For now, we're going to keep Senna in the ADC B tier, but if anything changes throughout the patch, we'll be sure to update you guys in the mid-patch tier list. This nerf is without a question more heavily targeted towards the pro scene, as Xayah is the only ADC nerfed for 13.18. Solo queue Xayah really isn't all that powerful right now, so she's going to be losing a lot of priority moving forward. Base health is dropping from 660 down to 630. Health growth is up, however, from 102 to 107. E cooldown is chopped at the earlier ranks, going from 11 scaling to 9 seconds to 13 scaling to 9 seconds. Overall changes that look to target Xayah's early laning strength, while her mid to late game really won't be affected at all. We'll be dropping Xayah down into the ADC B tier as a result of these nerfs. There are a few moving parts to the ADC tier list as we head into 13.18. OP tier will be locked down by just one champion, being Ashe. Ashe has been a cut above everyone else for a while now, and 13.18 gets even better for her due to a bunch of ADCs being tagged by the static Shiv nerfs. As mentioned earlier on in the video, Stormrazor buffs will directly impact Jhin the most, so we will be moving him up from A into S tier. With the static Shiv changes being more of a power shift than a straight up nerf, we're going to hold off on making any major adjustment to Shiv ADCs until mid-patch. Sivir, Kai'Sa, Zeri, and Vayne have been very reliant on static Shiv in recent patches, so if the changes do land on the negative side, they'll be the champions hit the hardest. A few of the highest value ADC bans of the patch are Kai'Sa, Ashe, and Ezreal. 3 ADCs who are most optimal for the lower ranks include Sivir, Misfortune, and Ashe. A support who's most definitely not in need of a buff but will be getting one anyways is Thresh. W shield amount per soul is going from 1.5 to 2. Bit of a scaling buff here to Thresh W and will give your team some more durability for the mid to late game. It's not the most insane buff we've ever seen, but it will help to solidify Thresh as a really strong S tier support pickup. Rel has actually come down in power a decent amount over the past few patches, but Riot has plans to hammer her down one more time. E movement speed is going from 15 scaling to 25% to 12 scaling to 20%. For the first time in a couple of months, Rel will no longer be an S tier rated champion or higher, as this nerf is going to push her down into A. The final change of the patch, and arguably the most exciting change, is headed to Bard. Passive out of combat movement speed max stacks is being increased from 5 all the way up to 10. Movement speed stack duration is seeing a huge buff as well, going from 7 to 20 seconds. As if Bard wasn't already a monster of a roaming champion, these buffs are going to make his map impact even greater. The stacks going from 5 to 10 is nice, but it's really the movement speed duration going all the way up from 7 to 20, which is huge. You'll very rarely have to worry about losing the movement speed stacks now, which will really help you out with those longer range roam plays where you're going from bot to top or from base all the way to top lane. Just getting around the map and securing vision for your team will be way more reliable now too. W is being changed as well, now having an ammo system with a max of 2 charges. W cooldown is being increased from 14 to 18 seconds to compensate, while W shrine charge time drops in half from 10 to 5 seconds. W movement speed is being lowered, going from 30% to 20, scaling to 30%. All in all, these are looking like really nice Bard changes, and even though Riot has them listed as adjustments in the patch notes, they're definitely buffs in our eyes. We expect Bard to gain a good chunk of power as a result of these changes, and we will be moving him up into the support S tier. Diving into the support tier list, the meta is looking quite similar to where it was in 13.17. Zyra and Blitz are the 2 champions taking home OP tier slots. You'll notice that Rakan has been pushed out of OP tier and into S, as Xayah losing strength for this patch will lower her priority, which in turn will have a negative impact on Rakan as well. Zyra has been an amazing champion ever since her buffs from a few patches back, and should be high priority if you're looking for that pure carry from the support role. Blitz is fresh off his adjustments from 13.17, which have turned out to be more positively skewed, so he's seen a rise in strength as a result. If you're looking to pick up Blitz, definitely try out the Everfrost Rush, as the solo carry power is really amplified with the item. We had moved a bunch of melee supports down the tier list in our recent 13.17 mid-patch update, but we're circling back on that for 13.18 and moving Maokai back into S. It was even Shroud being nerfed that hit a mass amount of melee supports, but Maokai is actually really good with Radiant Virtue right now, so he hasn't been affected to the same extent as other supports like Leona and Nautilus, who are more reliant on even Shroud. A few support champions most worth a ban right now include Nautilus, Blitzcrank, and Rakan. Heimerdinger, Zyra, and Blitzcrank are great low elo picks, as they don't rely as much on their ADCs to carry games. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So that's going to wrap everything up for the 13.18 solo queue tier list. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you back soon.